Yeah, so basically this is the Q&A part, and the floor is yours. Does anyone have any questions over there? Yeah.
I'm a writer, and quite often I'll arrange to get an interview with someone. I'll get really excited about it, and then they never do the interview. They stop answering my emails. So with this film, did you have anyone who you got really excited about, who you thought was going to be?
Yes. Yes. Oh God. Right. So this is like the
Several.
yeah the biggest one. The biggest one was Jean-Claude Van Damme, and I spent hours on the phone to his lawyer, getting passed back and forth. It was really me and Ty who were tag teaming, right? And we had it, we had such ambition. We were dealing with Arnie's people. There was, times when we were getting Arnie. We're absolutely going to get Arnie for the sci-fi one. Yeah, Jean-Claude Van Damme was so difficult. So we actually got to the point where we had a date arranged. We had a hotel suite, all of that. And at the last minute, it stopped. Yeah. And we had a contract. I had a contract from his lawyer. We'd signed it. So that was one of the most frustrating things. And you realise that a lot of it depends on luck, who you get on board first. I believe that if we had got Jean-Claude, we would have got Arnie. Like it would have, but that was one of the main challenges with this. Although I'm very, very happy with the lineup. I also think being in the UK, trying to get US people hampered us as well a little bit. But yeah.
So when you asked people to be on board, did they ask you who else is on board?
I think there was one or two emails where they said who else is being interviewed. I think Scott was.
Yeah.
So I reached out to all the people I'd interviewed for my book already, so people I had relationships with. So Vernon Wells, Ronnie Cox, Al Leon, Matthias Hughes, and a bunch of other people. And then once you had those people on board, then you could kind of say, oh, we've got these people on board that you've worked with. So when we reached out to Mark Lester, who directed Commando, we had already said, well, we've got Vernon Wells on board. So he then said yes. And then when you're talking to someone like Graham Yost, you're kind of saying, well, we've got all these people on board, and then they say yes. So it's kind of like a domino effect. Scott Adkins was kind of very late addition because he had said yes initially, and he was really excited, and then he got back to me and he said, actually, I've done a few documentaries where I'm featured very briefly in it, and I don't want to do that again. If I'm kind of in this, I kind of want to be in it. And I was like, well, the kind of structure that me and Ollie have planned out, it's kind of people being influenced by 80 stars. You're obviously influenced by Jean-Claude Van Damme, and then we're also going to kind of move into the action stars of today. So you're not just going to be a footnote at the end. I can see us kind of weaving you in throughout. And also, I'd already done all the interviews with a lot of people by then. So we had the guys at Millennium Films and Michael Jai White basically saying all these great things about Scott. And then Ollie edited together a kind of a quick reel of Scott Adkins' greatest praises that I just sent to Scott. And I was like, you sure you don't want to be in it? And he was like, that's kind of a dirty trick, but yeah, I'll be in it now.
He really helped sort of fill in the gaps. A lot of things like me and Michael were sort of trying to figure out how do we get to American Ninja, because we've already discussed ninja movies, but once Scott had said, the ninja craze had come back again, so we just slot that all into place. This becomes like a weird puzzle, effectively together.
He was the middle ground, wasn't he? Because he was a fan and he became.
Yeah, which is kind of how we figured out how we'd weave him in, because he's essentially someone who grew up with this genre and then became part of it.
Yeah.
That's cool. How did you end up with Alex Winter?
That's a Robin question.
That's a crossover.
Yeah, so talent are like buses. You wait for ages and then three come along at once. So once Ty and Ollie were like in the thick of it with In Search of the Last Action Heroes, I was like, well, I want to start my next one. In Search of Darkness, I think we had like maybe 50 contributors. Alex Winter, obviously because of Lost Boys, is in that, and I didn't even know that he was in like Death Wish. he just happens to be a really smart guy, and created a real link to be able to talk, just to add a bit of, a touchstone for that movie, because it's a very relevant movie. So, it's... I think the biggest challenge on this project was that we were coming from nowhere. This whole project started because of a conversation I had with Ollie at Comic-Con in Birmingham, going, this really sucks. I love your channel, but you're limited with YouTube because it's, you a whole bunch of reasons. But why don't we go and try and create something, ambitious? And I said to Ollie, what do you want to do? And he was like, well, I like, how about something about 80s action movies? And I was like, cool, let's do it. So we've been on this journey for a year and a half. And, you're dealing with so much uncertainty all the time. You don't know how much budget you've got. You don't know if you can do what you want to do. You're reliant on the kindness of talent a lot of the time, like a whole bunch of things which you have no control over. And often, these projects, they get dictated by who you can get in front of. And so just to be at the finish line, we've had some amazing reviews from the action community that have really embraced it. And I think there's a bigger picture emerging, because this is really the extension of fandom. We're just the same as you guys. We just love this stuff, and we want to write love letters to movies we remembered as kids, and that's what this is. But it was bloody hard. But it's just amazing to be here at the premiere. Everything, all the stuff for backers, and that's why the credits are so long. It's all being shipped out now, so we've done it. And to top it all off, we got a distribution deal with the biggest independent distributor in the world. And those things aren't easy to do. And they were all things we sat down at the beginning, Ollie and I, and were like, this is what we want to do. It just took us a little bit longer, and it was a little bit harder. But huge praise to Ollie, because it's such a huge... When I came across Ollie's channel, I'm sure many of you have watched his channel. I'm sure many of you are fans of his and wanted to support him as a creator. But when I came across Ollie's channel, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I used to have screenings at my house and have friends over and watch a movie and then watch Ollie's retrospective. And I was like, this is amazing. I remember the first time I met him, my career was in TV, and I've been around talent all the time, never phased. And I met him and I was blushing. And so
My family would find
yeah, right. It is bizarre, right? But I think to be able to, I think YouTube's incredible, and I think crowdfunding's incredible, and to be able to challenge yourself to take on a project that was really difficult in public with thousands of people that have invested in it, at your door, emailing every day saying what's happening with this movie, right? And to actually pull it off, that's huge credit to you.
Thank you, Robert.
Anything else? Yep. Damien?
Yeah, first off, I just wanted to say that was just sensational. I was completely blown away by it, and I just couldn't believe how much fun it was. I can't wait to share it with friends and others who haven't been able to see it here tonight. One question I had, probably for you, Ollie.
Yeah.
In terms of structuring it,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I loved was how it flowed. It was just seamless, and the way you managed to just intermingle all of the different sort of subplots and themes, whether it's Arnie versus Sly, or soundtracks, or merchandising, or whatever it is. Was that something? There was a broad kind of chronological structure, but was it something you set out to do, or was it just something that kind of fell into place as you went? Because the time just flew, and it was so much fun. But that is not easy to do, right? To really work like that. So I wasn't sure how deliberate it was from the outset, or did you just sort of fall into it?
Well, it's the first sort of cuts of the documentary were a bit sort of dry. It was more about the business side of things. So I kind of really wanted it to be about... My inspiration was kind of like the Electric Boogaloo, the Canon documentary, which had that chronological kind of structure to it, where you start at the beginning of Canon's kind of the business side in the early 80s, and it works its way through to the late 80s, and they sort of crumble, and they sort of go out of business. So I like that. I like the energy of that documentary, and I tried to sort of translate that to the action one. And Michael as well, sitting behind you, we'd sort of figured out the structure we wanted, and there's some things where we wanted to talk about specific movies like RoboCop, so we had to sort of fit it in the timeline. And luckily, I think things seem to flow quite well, because once you've got things like Graham Yost talking about high concept, it gives you that window to talk about Predator, Aliens, RoboCop. But you can't just keep doing movie after movie after movie. You have to break it up a little bit, and that's why you've got things talking about the cinema side, trying to appeal to a wider audience. And you sort of have that. What I love about documentaries is that I love the rise, but then the sort of fall of things, and then it comes back again. So with this, you've got Arnold and Stallone losing their momentum in the late 90s, which I was fully aware of and I remember quite vividly. So, and then obviously seeing them come back in their later age. So I always liked that sort of structure to those things. So hopefully that was sort of translated well through the action doc. Yeah, but it was a bit of a nightmare to get it down from me and Michael had like a great 3-hour cut. Love this 3-hour cut. Rob was like, you can't have that. It can't be that long, because it's got to be cut down. So the worst is cutting things down. But when you sort of fine tune things that way, you end up with better results.
Just on the length though, right? We're creating stuff for super fans. You know, like this isn't for general audience. You know, this is for people who are like super movie buffs that like love this stuff, where it's part of their identity. They know all the movies inside out. They know the scripts inside out, and that's what we wanted to deliver for. So the length didn't matter, and I'm really happy with you know, the fact that it's meaty. You know, like this is for people who are super fans, and I think that's where this kind of entertainment's going.
When I came onto the project, Oliver did actually have a story in mind, and that was kind of how these 80s action films evolved out of the 70s, where you did have heroes like Steve McQueen, and then your action heroes got muscular, and then they kind of got leaner in the 90s. And then when I was talking to Ollie, when we were kind of like initially planning out what questions we would ask, because the action genre is so vast, we were like talking about obviously the Hong Kong influence with like John Woo, and then I also kind of like, what about women in action like Cynthia Rothrock and Michelle Yeoh? That's a big chunk of it. And then the direct-to-video market like Canon. I mean, again, that's like a whole other documentary. You could do an entire film about black actors and blaxploitation in action films, and also like Bruce Lee's influence on the action thing. So it's kind of taking all these themes, and to Michael and Oliver's credit, kind of editing and turning this into like a cohesive 2-hour film, which is a challenge in itself, because when we were discussing it, we were like, this is going to be a 6-hour miniseries, which, you know, no one really wants to sit through if it's going to be like a 2-hour film. So how are we going to do this? And I think that kind of, like Ollie said, rise and fall and rise again story was the best way of doing it, but at the same time highlighting, you know, these kind of various inputs that came from around the world and the little off sections as well.
I mean, this is why I'm a huge fan of crowdfunding and where I think it's going, which is almost, you know, community powered entertainment, because you're not dealing with any kind of hierarchy or format or form. You can make what you want to make. And so, I remember having conversations about the length. And
you said like make it longer once we got the feedback, didn't you?
Because I listened to the feedback. But they so I was like, I'm wrong. Like, I'm happy to be wrong about. Look, I had to say like this is what 2 hours 20 minutes. 2 hours 20 minutes, and In Search of Darkness is 4.5 hours, right? And so I've completely flipped the other way. You know, like the super fans want like binge. You know, and you know, let's give the people what they want, you know. And there's like with this film, there's so much we didn't share, and in fact, there's so many interviews where people said stuff we couldn't share that wouldn't have got through legal. So, is there any other questions at all? Oh, yep, go for it.
Just throwing away an idea for a future documentary in search of the first superhero film, because now the superhero film genre is such a giant thing. Would a documentary relating the very first Donner Superman film to what came after? Would that ever be a prospect you would...
Doing a subject on like superheroes or fantasy, that is so broad. It's like, do you start off with like the Edgar Rice Burroughs like Tarzan, John Carter of Mars, pulp heroes like Zorro, who is Batman? Batman is Zorro. You don't get to Batman without Zorro. You can't just start off with like Richard Donner's Superman.
No.
And then before you know it, this thing is however many hours long. So you got to figure
Well,
out
it's the same-
what are you doing? Is it like the birth of
Yeah.
modern day superheroes? It's just
Well, it's like with the action
Yeah.
one, we didn't have superhero films in it. We didn't have Batman in it or the Punisher.
Yeah.
Or we could have maybe had more if we had interviewed someone to explore more of the James Bond films of the 80s.
There's a thing called
You know.
genre bleed, right? So
yeah.
The Predator will be in the sci-fi doc. Terminator will be in the sci-fi doc, but we'll cover them in different ways. With different people. Go for it. Yeah.
Blimey.
Just guys, putting you on the spot a little bit, could you each tell us what you think the best action movie of all time is?
Oh.
6 seconds to think. Not
You know what? All right.
the first thing came to you.
Okay. So if we're talking like action
No, you're
movies,
thinking about it. Go on.
It's got to be Predator. It's got to be Predator.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to go just in terms of sheer action. It's Hard Boiled.
Oh, that is
But
good.
you're a connoisseur. You're a connoisseur.
I mean,
Of
Hard
action,
Boiled.
aren't
It's just like
What would you got
that
with
is
the myth?
insane.
Predator.
There you go.
Yeah.
Or maybe Die Hard.
I went to a Predator screening with my friend Mikhail there, and we went to see Predator and Predator 2, and it was because I hadn't seen Predator for ages, and I watched it, and I was just like, it was like the first time I was watching it, like the flow and everything. Got to Predator 2, and the whole dynamic changed. It like dragged, and it was just like so different. And that's some of these films and some of these genres just become timeless, and that's one of them.
Is Die Hard a Christmas film?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
up for debate.
Stephen E. D'Souza says it is. He wrote it, but here are the rules. If a film is a Christmas film, if it wasn't Christmas, would the plot still happen? Now, Die Hard happens because he's going to LA to see his family at Christmas, and he goes to the Nakatomi Christmas party, and everything happens because it's Christmas. Lethal Weapon is set at Christmas, but at the same time, there's nothing that happens in the plot because it's Christmas. So it's not a Christmas film. It's just a film that's set at Christmas.
What about Die Hard 2?
These are the rules
People
I've
forget
just
about
made
Die
up.
Hard 2.
Exactly. Die Hard 2 is a Christmas film.
It's got snow in it.
Yes, but it's set at Christmas, and the airports are packed, and they shut it down because it's at Christmas time.
Is it
And they
Shane
go-
Black explained why he's obsessed with Christmas.
I didn't interview Shane Black.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, no, you'll learn that in Search of Tomorrow.
Tomorrow they'll be saying.
You got a question at the back, I think.
This goes for all three of you. If you could go back to day one, knowing what you know today, what would you do different?
Oh man, okay.
Will you have a 2-camera setup?
Yeah. The
It's a nightmare to edit out the ums and ahs of people talking. Tough.
Yeah.
do you know what? I think I would have tried to raise more money, right? Because we were hampered by that. We had to do a lot with very little. I think we raised about 100,000 in total across 2 campaigns, which sounds great, right?
Mm.
But it's not when you have to factor in merchandising, legal fees, insurance, like travel, talent fees. Not everyone, but you have to duck and dive.
Just thinking back at the whole process, I would have been less snippy with Stallone's publicist, who was a massive chore.
Yeah.
It was like a brick wall.
It was a brick wall.
It was a nightmare.
I sent a very nice email, and I got the bluntest, rudest reply. And from there on in, I was like, well, fuck
There is
you.
a stigma. There is a stigma about crowdfunded, documentaries for a reason, because many get started with great intentions. I don't believe anyone's ever done one of these as a scam, right? But just having finished 2, they're really hard work, and the margin for error and to get things wrong and to lose control of projects is so huge, and you need a team around you, and you need everyone to be really committed in order to make it happen. So that's why agents are like, what? Like, don't run away, right? Because they don't want anything tarnishing them. But I want to, I feel like the work we're doing is sort of, we deliver on this. We say what we're going to, we do what we're going to say. We get stuff out. It happens. It's real, And I feel that the credits are important. It's important if you back a project that you are a part of it. You're not going to get that at the cinema, but you are going to get it with the kind of stuff we do. And it's a way to sort of get closer to the work that inspired you.
Robbins also said that these are films for the fans, so me and Ollie were trying hard to kind of ask questions and kind of get anecdotes that you have not heard before, because I assume you've all seen the making of documentaries to all these films before, so you all know how, you know, the Terminator came to be. You all know like how James Cameron, you know, pitched his story for Aliens and Rambo 2. So we don't want to kind of tread over new ground. So it's just kind of coming up with questions and kind of moving the conversation in a way that you hadn't heard before and relating it to the bigger picture of the genre, rather than just kind of, so what's it like working with Arnie? Is he lovely? I hear he's lovely.
You could tell that you were aware of that in the whole edit, because it felt really fresh, like, to fans.
No, that's good. That's good.
Great.
Especially people with Graham Yost, because Graham Yost is also a really nice guy and a massive film nerd as well. So we're just kind of talking to him, and at the bit at the end where he goes, I know what you're getting at, Speed 2. That was me just kind of going, so what's it like when you kind of create a franchise and it's kind of taken away from you? And he's got a big Speed 2 poster behind where I'm sat, and he's like, I know what you're getting at. That was bought as a joke by some colleagues who saw it in a charity shop. I know what you're getting at. But he was really nice. And when you're talking to people who themselves are fans, like Zach Penn, and they are knowledgeable in their own right, that makes it so much easier to kind of get the content that we hope you guys want to see, because they're not dumbing it down. They're not afraid to kind of, if you're asking in-depth, detailed, nerdy questions, they're like, oh, these guys know what they're talking about. I can talk back on that level. Yeah. And so hopefully we kind of get stuff.
Time for one more question.
Nope. Someone's over there, wasn't it?
Who hasn't asked a question and wants to ask a question? Yeah, go for it.
How did you get Ian Nathan?
That was through my sister asked me that. The didn't you message him?
Yeah,
because you've written a book as well, and he knew who you were.
I think I'd met Ian Nathan at the Empire Big Screen at O2, and it was after he'd written The Alien Vault, and I know a couple of people at Empire.
TV, so I thought, how on earth did my father get him on that?
No, I know a couple of people at Empire, and I reached out to them. I was like, Ian's written the Terminator Vault and the Alien Vault, so he knows his James Cameron, and he would be good to have.
Ian was probably one of my favourites.
Yeah, you interviewed Ian, didn't you?
Yeah, I interviewed him.
Ian's incredible. He came and did a private Q&A for the team that I have on In Search of Tomorrow. He came in and just did a whole lecture about Blade Runner, and it was just phenomenal. He's I mean, he should be on more stuff. Yeah. Because he is. The thing is, right? America, you can just stick a camera in front of someone and they're all amazing, right? But you come to Britain and everyone can't speak and got no charisma, right? And so, but he's one of the rare guys that's British, can talk about film and is interesting to listen to, and is like got that timing. You're like da 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 bam, and you're like, oh, brilliant.
I discovered it when me and my sisters watched that film Discovery show, on Sky Arts.
Yeah,
he's brilliant.
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant.
And he's and he's a lovely fella. He's a lovely fella.
So I think hopefully there'll be more documentaries in the future that he will pop up in. But he's in the Alien memory.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's brilliant in that. Holds his own with the Americans. One last question. I think you have one.
Yes. Is there anybody that you interviewed that you did not use?
Yeah.
No, we used everyone.
Did we?
Who's the guy that knew about the toys? There was a toy guy.
Yeah.
Stuart Ashton. We interviewed him. He was going to be in it, but then because he was only in part of the we were supposed to have a video game sequence, right? That became a special feature on the disc. So Stuart was talking about toys, but then he just pops up for like 5 minutes and disappears. I'm like, what's a bit pointless? Shoehorned in. I said to Stuart, look, he's got to go. He goes, it's fine. So he's part of the special features.
There was an early draft where you had no Al Leon, and I kind of complained. I was like, look, I know he's had 3 strokes, but it's Al Leon. You've got to have him in there somewhere. Al Leon, as I'm sure most of you know, is the quintessential 80s henchman. He's in everything, like Lethal Weapon, Big Trouble in Little China, Die Hard. But in the 90s, he had a stroke, and then he had another stroke, and he's paralyzed down like one half of his body. So his kind of memory isn't what it is, and it takes a while for him to recollect things, and he kind of repeats himself. But at the same time, he has some amazing stories, and he's like the nicest guy. So we had like one cut where there was very little of him, but because he's kind of like a big fan favorite, there was kind of me just pushing to kind of get more of in, especially where he's telling the story of how he was on the set of Die Hard, and he's like, Alan Rickman, this guy's speaking really slowly. It's not going to work. Mark my words, this Alan Rickman's not going to amount to anything. And
What's like Mark Goldblatt, the editor? He had
he's Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's,
Yeah, and he's retired from editing. But.
So throughout the interview, by the end, he's quite tired. So that little moments where he talks about the Punisher and other stuff, we couldn't use that because of the speed and the pace of it. So, but the first half, his energy's so good, and he knows his action genre.
He's got like a mini. It's
amazing.
like a theatre room like this up at the top of his house. And it's just like pull-back wardrobes, just packed with films. Yeah, it's great.
After this Q&A, we're going to be. Everyone can leave with a poster. I'm really happy with the poster art, and if you want, we'll sign it for you if that's the kind of thing you're into. So we've got the cinema till 10:30. So I suppose we could do one more question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oliver, what's next for you?
Work-wise, I was going to next year I'll be working on a documentary on Street Fighter 2, which is basically on the video game that I was obsessed with in the early 90s. So it's the golden era of that video game from 91 to 94. So that will cover everything that was kind of all the updates of the video game, the conversions to the Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, Player's Guide, the toys, the movie, the animated movie. So that will be kind of my next big thing. Hopefully it'll work.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very, very much.